Hello, I'm Jake Boudrot, Civic Journalist at Tello Community Television. With me today for the third in a series of interviews around issues of importance to the municipality of the County of Richmond is the Warden. Welcome back, Lois Landry.
Hi, thanks very much for having me again.
So I understand that Municipal Council has had a number of meetings in the budget deliberations, and perhaps you can update us on how that process has been going.
Budget deliberations occur at council meetings, and all meetings of council are public. We don't tend to see a lot of people come to those meetings, and truly they're about as interesting as watching paint dry. Like I understand that. But some important things happen there, and they happen in a slow, kind of laborious process, but really important things. So what happens is, so if you think about the municipal government, staff does the work, but they do the work that they're directed to do by council. So council makes the decisions and staff kind of carry those out. There are some things, but councils come and councils go, and we rely on staff to really have a good understanding of the workings of the things that the municipality is responsible for. So, for example, we would expect our Director of Public Works to have a good understanding of the state of our water and sewer infrastructure across the municipality, etc. So what happens is staff kind of come to us in each of their respective departments about, look, this is where we are with our municipal responsibilities. Here's where some of our obligations are. Here's where some of our priorities are. And council, you have said this is of interest to you, so this is what that's going to cost, and these are the requests we get from community groups and that kind of thing. So we tend to look at it in three buckets, and sometimes you can have a motion of council to accept one or two of the buckets and then move on to the third. I think we're probably going to sort of do all of it together, but one bucket is our grants. So what kind of money do we take from the municipal coffers and give to organizations and community groups? Keeping in mind, we also want a bucket where people can apply through the year for, we want to put a roof at the Hall in Discoos, that kind of thing. So those contributions would go to things like Cape Breton South recruiting for health and the senior safety navigator position through Kingston Memorial Clinic and so on. So that's one kind of bucket that we're working through, looking at past contributions and are we getting bang for our buck. The second kind of bucket is capital. So what are the dollars it's going to cost us to maintain water and sewer services? What is the state of affairs where our landfills are concerned, solid waste? So those kinds of things. And what happens in those meetings is we talk about, okay, how much is that going to cost? Where is the funding coming for that? Now, I'm all about, if there are places provincially we can apply to, sure, let's apply for all the things. But when there's no place you have to apply to, what that means that the municipal tax base is on the hook for that. So that's where we're really kind of, okay, well, that's, can we ask taxpayers to foot that bill? And I'll give you a small example. One of the things we're kind of on the fence about is a piece of the driveway system at our municipal landfill. Should we pave it? It hasn't been paved before. It would be good if it was paved, but where do the other, do we have enough money in our existing coffers to do that? And if not, do we want to add that to the list of things we need to take out of there? So those are the discussions we have. Can we afford to do that or not? And so then the third one is really the operating budget. So the money that goes to kind of the big ticket items. So we had a series of meetings about grants and infrastructure, capital. So those two things are kind of, okay, done. But we need to go over here to operations and see, okay, if we have a wish list and we say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, what do all the dollars there add up from the three buckets? And does the tax rate, 85 cents, does that give us enough money to get there? And if not, do we have to let some things go, or is there a way to apply for additional funding, or does the tax rate have to go up? So those conversations will continue into June, but we will have a budget that is finished, because we're already 3 months into or 2 months into now, the 25-26 fiscal year. So we're already kind of spending $25-26 without a budget, which is not, that happens in a lot of municipalities. So we're still kind of in those conversations, but we expect to have the budget finalized. We will have the budget finalized before summer, or else there will be no summer for us. But we expect to get there sort of by sometime through June.
My understanding was one of the items you guys are discussing is the Richmond Arena. Now there's repairs that have to be made, and I think you guys are in the process of assessing exactly what work needs to be done and trying to figure out how much that's going to cost.
Yeah. So there's questions about, and there have been for years, do we repair? Do we build new? Or do we have nothing? And I think that there is a consensus. We haven't taken a vote, raise your hand, or anything like that, but I think there is a consensus. We don't want to be a municipality with nothing. That's what I've heard around the council table. That's what I've heard around the community. We don't want to be a community that has nothing. So then, are we repairing, or are we building new? And there was, to the credit of the last council, a decision made to do a feasibility study. And it wasn't like that was all for naught. But one of the things that told us is that we've talked about it before, that $588 per square foot is not nothing. And we just don't have the money for that at this moment. We also know that should we decide, say, let's do a new arena, we would be 2 years, 3 years away from that happening anyway. And in that 2 to 3 year window of, cutting the ribbon from zero to cutting the ribbon, welcome everybody, come on in that 2 to 3 year window, there's a lot going on around the municipality, around green energy, including hydrogen and offshore wind. So our tax base could change dramatically over those 2 to 3 years. So what I also think has been a consensus, and again, no motion of council, so it's my interpretation of it, but I do think there was a consensus. We don't want to be in the situation Bedeck was in, where they didn't want to talk about a new facility, fix things, and now they're in the middle of not having anything, and how long before they actually get going. So we have decided that we want to figure out whether we can maintain the arena for long enough to get us to the point where we see an increase in our tax base and we have the money to be able to afford it. But we also don't want to throw good money after bad. So what we've agreed to do is, so first off, there is some OHS things that were flagged by the Department of whatever. So those things have to get done unless we want to close the arena today. We don't. So those things are mandated. So there's some money that's going to those kinds of OHS things. That's occupational health and safety. So some labor standards and some standards around safety. Those things happen all the time. But aside from that, we want to make sure that we have money put aside in the budget for repairs to the arena that get us far enough along to say, are we interested in a new facility? But we don't want to throw good money after bad. So what we have done is gone back to that 2019 study, which says, and everybody agrees, like nobody disagrees with this, what's under the floor of the arena is a disaster, and we have got to get that out. It's leaking brine. We have all of the closures and the late starts are because of that. So that is $5 million that we need to make sure that, and we can't do it this summer coming up because the people who are available to do that kind of work can't do it this summer. So it's good. We need to hobble through to next summer to hopefully get that work done that allows us to say, yeah, we've got something for at least 5 years that's we can. And so should we build a new facility, it would be seamless. You would just go from a working, functioning old building to a new building. But One of the things that is flagged in the 2019 study is some stuff about the roof and the structure of the building that holds the roof up. And so we didn't get in that study a really good analysis of that because it was really just sort of inspection and assumptions. So it's a 50-year-old building, the roof must be bad. Well, that's not enough to kind of make good decisions about. So we are bringing in an engineer to remove some pieces of gyprock or whatever to actually survey from an engineering point of view the things, the parts of the structure that hold up the roof. And so, because we need to be mindful of liability too, right? If we don't have the right snow load infrastructure, do we have enough confidence in what holds up the roof and when there is snow on it to say, sure, everybody come on in, this is a safe place for you to be. So long as that tells us that, yeah, your roof and the infrastructure that holds up your roof will last 5 to 10 years, great. We're happy to repair the arena, put some money into it so that we have more than enough time to get us to the discussions about whether to have a new facility. So we're really trying to say, okay, Bedeck ran into some trouble, they've got nothing. We don't want to be Bedeck. But we also don't want to throw money and then have it close. And we don't want to ask taxpayers to foot the bill for something we just can't afford right now. But we also want to be mindful that we have a 50-year-old thing. So it's about kind of taking all of those factors and each year kind of making good decisions as stewards of those resources. So what we're looking at now is putting money in reserve, and should the structural people say, no, well, then we've got money in reserve to start talking about new, right? So it's all about sort of making good decisions. And I will say that we are looking at gas tax and provincial dollars. So Digby, for example, just got 1.5 million, I think, to repair their arena. So we're looking at programs that are available, plus sort of those one-off announcements that you sometimes get from government and both levels of government. So we're hoping that those don't really come from, you know, the money that you go down to the municipality and pay your taxes with. So we'd like to see more of that, if not all, through gas tax, through CCBF, whatever it's called. And so we're looking at the ways to keep something opened in a seamless way, mindful of the fact that we do not have the money for a new arena at this moment.
Also, you guys are undertaking some revisions to bylaws right now. Maybe you can update on how that process is going.
Sure. So there are bylaws and there are policies, and we have a committee called the Bylaw and Policy Committee. We also have some zoning bylaws that are really important in terms of what you can build in certain areas. So we are looking at some bylaws changes that really revolve around our zoning, and some of them are more logistics. So how do we communicate with you about changes that might be happening around you, an individual homeowner? So there are some parts of the Municipal Government Act that talk about variances, and if zoning does not allow for something, you can apply for a variance. And I'll give you an example of that. I actually got a variance as a homeowner back in 2017. So my house, I picked it up and I moved it and I put it on a new foundation. And in order to do that, I needed a building permit. I couldn't get it under the current zoning bylaws on Almadam because I would have been too close to the water. So I was able to apply for a variance because I was already too close to the water, but I was also too close to the road, and two different people had driven into my house because it was so close to the road. And I had a straight pipe to the ocean. It was my grandparents' house. The septic was straight pipe to the ocean. So if I could move my house, I could put an on-site septic system, which is better for the environment and so on. So based on that, I was granted a variance. But variances only happen if you talk to your neighbors, not you, but Eastern District Planning talks to your neighbors and said, do you have any concerns? So the procedures for communicating with your neighbors that EDPC has to follow, we had tried to make some changes, and then we have to kind of change them back because the Municipal Government Act can't be modified in some places and it can in others. So just a little bit of a correction there. The other one we're working on, though, is a little more significant, and that is around secondary units or backyard suites. So we know we're in the middle of a housing crisis. There aren't a ton of programs that you can apply for through the provincial or federal government as individual homeowners to try to support and try to increase our housing stock. But one of them is the backyard suite program. So you can apply to the provincial government to put a backyard or secondary suite on your property. And you can get 50% of the cost of that, up to a maximum of $40,000. You can get $40,000 from the government toward that. If you want to put it and there's some criteria, so it has to be either, seniors or adults with disabilities, or anything that's sort of affordable. So very few places in the province actually allow that. I am very happy to say that Richmond County, we believe, was the first municipality in Nova Scotia to allow backyard suites, because Halifax made a big to-do back in 2018, I think, about, we're going to allow backyard suites. We had done it before. But the zoning in Richmond is different in different areas. So the zoning in St. Peter's allows for backyard suites, no problem. On Almadam, you have to be able to show that you can subdivide. You don't have to subdivide. You have to be able to show you can. So right now we're looking to change that. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, what are all the levers that we can pull that help bring housing stock to Richmond County, and what can the municipality do to allow that? So one of the things that spurred that on is Jeremy Carroll's outfit, Brela Homes, is doing one of the first backyard suites in Cape Breton for an adult with disabilities. So it's a great story. I'm not sure how much longer it will be there, but if you drive around Pondville, you'll see the unit there. It's great, and there's an adult with a disability. He and his family are going to put that unit on their property. And so the zoning currently doesn't stop them from doing that. We just want to make sure it doesn't stop anybody from doing that. We're also looking at ways that we can support that with our utilities and that kind of thing. But given that we are in the year 3 now of a 5-year human rights remedy, which is a significant change to the way people with disabilities are going to be treated in this province. We're really pleased to be able to support any of those initiatives, and we're really pleased to be among the first in the province who do that. They put a Facebook post about this, and underneath it there were lots of comments from places like Victoria. Too bad we can't do this here. So there's a lot of places where municipalities get in the way of housing, and we're really pleased to be able to say we have no interest in getting in the way of anything that supports housing.
Also, you've had a number of community meetings, and I believe it's not in your capacity as warden, as more as District 2 councillor, and maybe you can provide some information on how those went and
Sure.
What was discussed.
Yeah, sure. So I am the only new councillor this time around. So Brian Marchand is new to the table this time around, but he was councillor for 12 years. So everybody knows Brian, and the other 3 have been councillors for the last 4 years. So mindful of the fact that I am new, and I like community meetings. In my job in the public school system, we had parent-teacher, we had the public coming into the school all the time. So that feels very familiar to me. So I had hoped to do it in the winter, but then it just seemed like the weather would never cooperative. So I organized 5 meetings, have had 4 so far. And I tried to spread them out because I'm mindful of the fact that timing is not right for everybody. So Janvrin's Island on a Sunday afternoon, Rocky Bay on a Sunday night, Discouse on a Friday night, West Arishat on a Monday night, and then I'm actually having one after I leave here in Arishat through the day. So mindful of retirees who prefer to travel through the day. So those meetings have been really interesting. Number one, nobody goes outside of their community. So not once, even though I was really careful to have them at different times so people could always find one, not one did somebody from a different community go to for the most part. So that's interesting. And people feel really comfortable in their communities. The Hall in Discoos is a place where people are very comfortable going if you're from Discoos. So that's an important thing for me to kind of be mindful of. The conversations have been really vast and varied, and some of it has been, things that aren't municipal in nature. So as you can imagine, you go to Jambrins Island, they're going to want to talk about the bridge, they're going to want to talk about the roads, all good things. And there are times where your municipal councillor can advocate for things that are provincial. One of the others that came out, speaking of, not our jurisdiction, was somebody did flag at those meetings that we have a new MP who's not a new MP. So Jaime Batiste has been a member of parliament for 6 years in a riding that had different boundaries than this one. So there is some area where it overlaps Eskasoni and that general vicinity, but the rest of the riding, which is ginormous, he was not the MP, but he's a seasoned MP. So it's a little bit of a unique thing because of the way the boundaries changed. So one of the things that somebody flagged at these community meetings was, we have a new MP who's not a new MP. And his work has been primarily in an urban kind of center. It was Sydney, Victoria. There were some areas, but this is primarily rural. So, is there a way that we can just flag to him our concerns about cell service, which would be a huge concern, monumentally more significant in Cape Breton, Canso, and Antigonish than had been the case in Sydney, Victoria, his old district. So, that's one of the things on the council meeting tonight is to just sort of ask council to give permission to write a letter to our new MP to just flag this as a concern. So that came out of community meetings. There were some topics that were no surprise. So the deer. So have had some conversations with DNR. That is on the agenda tonight as well. But certainly, it's been really good to get more anecdotal information from those meetings. So, at one of the meetings, somebody talked about how they won't let their granddaughter scoot across the field to come to their house because there's so many deer in Rocky Bay and there are so many ticks on all of those deer that we just don't even want our kids running through the fields anymore, right? The way we would have run to our grandparents' houses. It talks about, the number of vehicle strikes and the threats that are being made to people on Isle Madame about deer strikes and insurance. So nothing in writing, interestingly, but 2 different people have talked to me about how their insurance providers, when they had to call for the 5th time because they've hit a 5th deer, have been told on the phone that their insurance providers are no longer going to cover wildlife strikes for them or for any residents of Isle Madame. Now, who knows how true that is, because when it's on the phone, it's nothing when it's in writing. But that being on the cusp of where we are is really significant. So bringing to council tonight some updates about the deer population. There were certainly some conversations about things that were very local in nature. So in West Arishat, litter around on the sides of the road as it relates to that area between Martinique and it wouldn't take more than 1 bag of garbage flying off somebody's truck. And there's no houses in that stretch, so there's nobody kind of keeping it up. But what it means to sort of have to drive through a community, both to locals and to tourists, and what it says about your community. So lots of discussion about those kinds of local issues. Couple of questions about, fire services and so really, really good discussions. And in a lot of cases, it spurs conversation and direction for us as councillors.
Now, the province said it will be providing an additional $1 million to the Provincial Capital Assistance Program for the 2025-2026 program year. And from now on, due to the end of the beautification and streetscaping program and the community works program. So would that change? And now I know you guys have made 2 applications to the PCAP program. One was the Arishat Water, and the other was the landfill expansion. So those are your applications for this year. At some point in time, do you figure next year there might be some change to what you want to apply for?
Oh, we're going to apply for everything all the time. Like, there's no disadvantage to applying to programs. I will say a lot of them are cost shared, right? So you have to be able to say, we want to apply for this money, knowing that you would give us a certain percentage and we have to come up with the other percentage. But we are always mindful of where are the places where we can apply for funding. And I think what the decision that the province has made, I think it probably speaks to streamlining application processes. So whenever you have two different places and you have a project, you have to decide whether it's going to A or B. And then sometimes it's A versus B. This has this much money, this has this much money, and oh, we went over budget here, but under budget there. So I think there's sort of an effort to streamline the application process, streamline the budgets so that you have a better sense, and happy to see additional money being put into infrastructure. So, 100 and whatever, or 1 point whatever million dollars is going to go into infrastructure projects across this province. That's a good news story because whatever happens has to happen with infrastructure in mind. So those are, we'll be mindful of the ways that we can better leverage those dollars, but hats off to the staff at the municipality who are always on the lookout for those. And it's interesting because I feel like, as somebody before I got on council, I used to see, gosh, I see all these announcements about money that is, going to other municipalities and not ours. But I will say, I think where we have fallen short is really kind of patting ourselves on the back and saying, hey, look over here, we got this money. Because we have been applying for those kinds of grants and we have been getting, big amounts of money. So we just had 2 successful applications for environmental assessments that are going to be fully funded around coastline and that kind of thing. Are going to be fully funded by the province. So we're really pleased when we can apply for projects, and even more pleased when we find out we're the successful applicants.
Speaking with the MLA for Richmond, Trevor Boudrot, he did note that he expected some progress to be made on Pondville Beach Provincial Park, specifically moving the parking lot and work to the wharf, I believe, as well. And I believe tenders have been awarded or will be awarded soon. So maybe you can provide some update on what you know about what's going on there at the beach.
Sure. So in my, what are we doing about the deer calls, say, okay, well, do you want to talk about anything else? Sure, let's talk about Pondville Beach and Martinique Park. And just a quick little thing about Martinique Park. Martinique Park, if you drive by there, still has these cones there. And I really have wondered why they've been there for a year, but my husband actually went over and did a little inspection. We never had guardrails there before, but it was because there was so much grass that had grown up. We didn't realize it's a complete drop-off right after the pavement ends. So when the bushes were taken away to do the work, sort of realized there should seriously be some guardrails here. So that's what those cones are there for, and they're just waiting for a time when other guardrails are put in one of the many projects happening this summer, and they'll come and add that guardrail there. So I wanted to ask about that. And the other one was sort of an update about Pondville Beach. Yeah, so a tender went out. It went out, I think, the 4th of May, and it closed the 29th of, April, and it closed the 29th of April. So to the best of my knowledge, I actually Googled this morning, and I don't think it's been awarded yet, but we know that there are some companies who have thrown their hat in the ring. So basically, there is $1.2 million, which is a sizable investment into Pondville Beach. But it's going out in 2 tenders. So that 1.2 is distributed in 2 different tenders. And the first one is the parking lot, which will include accessible change rooms and accessible bathrooms, which is great. Now, I do want to sort of pause here and say, lots of rumors in the community about artifacts that they found, and that had sort of stalled the project. So they did in fact find artifacts, but they don't go back thousands of years. They go back a few hundred, so farmers, implements, which doesn't really stall the project. But you will see when it's all said and done, you're going to see these two areas that kind of jut out on the sides that look like they forgot to do them. And that's because that's where they found those two. So at some point there might be a plaque that says, you know, here we found this stick, or here we found this axe, or whatever. So that's just mindful of our history, and so it'll be a nice place, but it'll look like it's not finished, but that's why that's going to happen. So what happens is they have 1.2 million. Whatever that tender comes in at, you subtract that from 1.2 million. So if it's going to cost 100,000 or $1 million to do that, well, you have 0.2 million left. If it costs 200,000, well, you have $1 million left, right? So it's 1.2 million minus the parking lot expenses will be left over to handle everything related to the wharf. So the wharf cannot be taken down. If they get rid of that wharf and that structure, what happens is the sand dunes will close up that brook that takes you, which is a bad news bears story for stagnation, and that it is now a part of the infrastructure. So, but the wharf is clearly in disrepair. So they are going to do some things that involve armor stone, and we are really hopeful that there will be some accessibility features in whatever that turns out to be. And in fairness, nobody's sure what that will be until they award the tender and figure out how many dollars they have to work with. So we're waiting to hear. So the reason so it's on the council meeting tonight as well, Committee of the Whole, just to kind of give an update to council and to say, look, we aren't going to have any Committee of the Whole meetings in the summer. So is there a way that we can just get staff to kind of keep an eye on the project and see, is there anything we can do as a municipality to piggyback on whatever is happening there? So more just about investigating, but that's the update. And I'm, really pleased to see the park will be open the beach will be open this summer. There will be porta potties put in while they work on because not sure how long it'll take, but there won't be any delay in the opening. And it shouldn't be any delay on the parking lot aspect of it in terms you should still be able to go down to the beach. So yeah, lots. It'll be nice to sort of see that come to fruition. So it was really good to get that update.
So more than 60 Nova Scotians, including people with disabilities and family members, have been appointed to new committees that will provide advice on disability support in their communities. The 4 regional advisory councils, which will work with the government and other partners, were a recommendation in the Nova Scotia Human Rights Remedy, an agreement that guides the government's work to transform the disability support system in Nova Scotia. Now, I understand we received a press release last week that you are a member of the Eastern Region Council, so perhaps you can talk a little bit about that and how that came to be.
Yeah, sure. So like everybody on council and like probably large majority of your listeners, I wear multiple hats. So my involvement on the regional committee for the implementation of the Human Rights Remedy is really not related to my work on council. In addition to being a councillor and the warden, I'm also on the board of directors for Inclusion Nova Scotia. I chair one of the 2 boards at L'Arche Cape Breton, and I am a mother of an adult child with a disability. So I have always been an advocate and very, keeping an eye on the landscape around things that impact my family, Frankie in particular. So that's always been something that I've been really super mindful of because, it speaks to my family's experience. But also as a school principal, I saw other families that, were struggling with finding services for their adult children, particularly when they, once they left school. And I will say that up until about 2021, it was a dismal prospect when your kids left school. So aging out of the public school system felt very much like you were falling off a cliff. And so we lived in a province that really did a terrible job of supporting adults with intellectual disabilities. So it was so bad that we did some things that are really black marks on our province's, in our province's history. So a couple of those things involved adults with disabilities if their families were no longer able to care for them, we didn't have enough Loosedale group homes and Hearts of Almadam and Larshes. We didn't have nearly enough of those for all the adults with disabilities who needed those kinds of supports, because that's all there was. And so if that's all there is and we don't even have enough of them, it's a pretty dismal state of affairs. So there were some folks that would be taken into care in their own little communities, but would be forced to live, different parts of the province. And so that's a bad news story. That's cruel, that's harsh. We would never do that. If you have an adult senior citizen who needs to go into a long-term care, it is possible they'll put them in the first bed, but they immediately make an effort to move them back to their close community. None of that happened for adults with disabilities. And so there was one situation that was so bad that, as was often the case, it went to court. So there were 3 adults with disabilities who needed some mental health support. And I'm talking about adults who would have been wonderful additions to, like, the Loosedale group homes, or lovely, lovely additions to the Hearts of Almadam. People that we see in our own community. People just like our people. And they needed some mental health support, and that's really hard to find for adults with disabilities, with intellectual disabilities. So they went to the Nova Scotia hospital. That's the only place they could get service. But then what was worse is once they got some service, they wouldn't let them leave. They wouldn't let them leave because they said, well, there's really no other place to put you. So I want you to imagine somebody who's living at the Loosedale group home or at the Almadam, Hearts of Almadam, and they need some mental health support, and they have to go to the Nova Scotia hospital, and then somebody says they have to stay there. There were people who lived there. One woman lived there for 12, not days, not weeks, and not months. She was forced to live there for 12 years in the place where we put our criminally insane. So that group of people, that group of 3, launched a lawsuit, and a group called the Disabilities Rights Coalition said, we're going to go, we're with you. And so most of those lawsuits got settled, but for whatever reason, this group said, we're not settling. Now, 2 people in that group of 3 actually died during the course of, and this took forever to go through. So when it came time for a decision, this group, the court said, yes, these 3 people have been discriminated against. No surprise there. But what was surprising was that the court said, these people have been discriminated against, comma, and Nova Scotia systematically discriminates against adults with disabilities. That sent shockwaves through. So the government was like, no, we have to appeal that. They tried, and the court said, forget it, Slick, you're done. And so Premier Houston issued an apology, which is really, it was jaw-dropping. It was an acknowledgement, and it was an acknowledgement of the terrible things we've done for adults with disabilities. And so that apology was really a white flag from the part of the province, like, listen, we're not going to appeal anything anymore. We know we've done wrong. So what the court did was it said, government and the Disabilities Rights Coalition, figure it out. So they got 2 experts, one from BC, one from Australia, to say, here's where you are right now in Nova Scotia, and here's where you should be based on being mindful of people's human rights. And you have 5 years to get from here to here. So at year 1, at the end of year 1, you're supposed to be in one place, at the end of year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. So we're April 1st marked going into year 3. And there are real safeguards. But what I think it's important for people to keep in mind is this is not the kind of thing you see. We used to see it in education all the time, right? Reports and white papers and series of recommendations that government can choose to abide by or not. This is court ordered, and if they don't, there are serious consequences for that. So there are a series of things. So institutions need to close. So the Breton Ability Centre needs to close. Currently, there's no new admissions to those facilities. An institution is anything over 4 people living in a house. Doesn't impact anything in Richmond County because none of our places have more than 4 in a home. But that is going to impact, like the New Dawn guest home has 27 people in it. 23 of those people have to be relocated. And they have to get the services they're entitled to in their own community. So, we have people living in Loosedale group homes who are not from their own community not because they loved Loosedale or loved Ayrshire, but because there was nowhere for them to go in their communities. That can't happen again. And nobody can be on a wait list anymore. You have to get services. So there is a tremendous change in the way we're going to do business, and to be mindful of the fact that that looks different in Halifax than Cape Breton. They have these regional committees that are going to start to inform policy and how that will be implemented locally. So I am one of the people who will be sitting on the eastern zone, which is Cape Breton. There is some overlap between the municipality and such, because one of the things that we know is that there's a lot of that revolves around housing, and it revolves around housing in places where adults with disabilities live. So no more can we say we're going to build something in Sydney for all of Cape Breton. My Frankie will not be going to Sydney. I say so, but it doesn't matter if I say so. They're not going to require him to go there. So there are a lot of those kinds of changes. And so, for example, the Backyard Suite program is one of the first times where originally that was for seniors. And then they added adults with disabilities, because for some adults with disabilities, that is a good solution to the remedy. So individualized funding will come out for adults with disabilities, and they'll be able to purchase services. So no more will, for example, the Hearts of Almaden. They won't get, there won't be money that goes to beds. They will provide a service, and somebody can choose that service or not, and they'll pay out of their individualized funding. So huge shift in the way that happens. And I did actually, as warden, I was interviewed by some folks being hired. So the independent living position did come and reach out to me as warden and say, okay, as we support adults with disabilities, what kinds of things are available in the municipality so that we can help support them? This is a huge shift, right? I mean, you cross your fingers that after 7 or 8 years, your child's name might finally come up on the list for L'Arche, the Hearts, those kinds of places. Gone are the days of that. So it's really exciting to be a part of that, and I'm interested in the huge ramifications from housing. They anticipate that between the Breton Ability Centre and just the places like New Dawn, there's 200 people need to be relocated with disabilities in CBRM, and they do not have a significant vacancy rate. So what does that mean? Where are they going? Where is the housing to support that? And as principal, I know who was, in need of those kinds of services that are currently in grade 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So what happens when they turn 21, and how does our housing stock relate to their ability to get what they're entitled to? So it's a really exciting time. I'm happy to be involved as Frankie's mother and as a parent, but I'm also sort of mindful about what the municipality, so I'm really, really proud of Richmond's commitment to changing zoning to make sure that all the options that are available are not going to be held up by our municipality, and very few municipalities can say that.
Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come down, speak with me, answer my questions, and speak with our viewers, and for the third in a series of discussions. And the plans are that we will be having more of these going forward.
Yeah, I'd like to. I'm really pleased to be able to do these. And again, if you have any questions, you can send them to Jake at tellil.ca. I will say that I was at the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities conference, spring conference, and some councillors from, I want to say Guysborough, but it was a lot of people sitting at a lot of different tables who actually have seen these and were asking about, what made you decide to do that? And they really, they themselves have been sort of exploring ways, because they said it is a really nice way to kind of push out questions that come from residents. So happy to keep doing them, and happy to entertain questions from other folks that want to sort of funnel them through you as well.
Yes, by all means, please reach out. You can call here at 902-226-1928. Email me at jake@tellil.tv. And hopefully we'll be getting some more participation, and we'll be continuing to have these conversations, as we said. And thank you very much.
Good, thank you.